do an okay job chairing the committee. If we could get a roll call, please.
Representative Angelos.
Here.
Representative Burkhart.
Here.
Representative Byron.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Sting.
Here.
Representative Storer.
Here.
Representative Winter.
Here.
Vice Chairman Western.
Here.
And Madam Chairman Newsom. Excused.
Committee, the first bill for our consideration is going to be House Bill 74, Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. Director Westby, please make sure we know who you are, but just state your name and department, please.
Mr. Vice Chair, committee, thank you. My name is Darren Westby. I'm the Director of State Parks and Culture Resources. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about House Bill 74. It was a interim committee bill discussed quite heavily over the last year to try to really bring light to not only the Office of Outdoor Recreation, what it does, why it's important, but also to try to put a wrap on some funding mechanism to really ensure that we can get this office up and running and develop the opportunities for the rest of the state for in that outdoor rec world. Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a little bit of background to educate the committee, and I do also want to appreciate and thank you all for jumping on that quick 1-hour Zoom call to force feed you with some of the information that our agency does, one of which I think we talked about this bill as well, but just reiterating a little bit about what the Office of Outdoor Recreation does and why we brought it forward was during the Meade administration, there was a outdoor rec task force that he created, and stakeholders throughout the state got together several times throughout a year and really created the report of recommendations to the governor to ensure that the significance of the impact, the potential impact of outdoor recreation is felt in the state of Wyoming. And by doing that task force and going through all those meetings, one of the things that came up was the creation of the Office of Outdoor Recreation. The governor put it in our office, said, figure out how to get it stood up, figure out how to get it funded, figure out what you need to do to ensure that it's successful. So over the past 5+ years, we've just been bake sailing, doing whatever we can to rob from state parks a little bit here, a position here from state parks, and trying to get it stood up because like I keep saying, the significance, the impact, not only economic, but also just everything that goes with outdoor recreation, whether it's the growth of outdoor recreation, lack of growth of outdoor recreation, the lack of product that we have that Director Schober and her office gets to market and bring people to the state so they can recreate and leave their tourism dollars and go home. All of those things are important in the success of the Outdoor Rec Office. And what the Office of Outdoor Recreation has been doing over the course of the last several years is going out into each, I should say pretty much each one of your guys' communities to bring forward a facilitated effort of community stakeholders, state, local governments, federal governments together to where we're not parachuting into your community and telling you what you should do as an outdoor rec perspective, but you all tell us what you would like to see your community or your area to look like in terms of outdoor recreation, and we facilitate bringing the right people to the table to ensure that we can start check marking some of those ideas that are coming out of those collaboratives. And what we found, one, it's a big beast. Outdoor recreation is a big beast. There's a lot of land that we have. There's a lot of opportunities that we're missing. There's also a lot of things that I think you can all attest over 2020. The amount of influx of people that are using outdoor recreation exploded. And part of the problem and the pinches that I think everybody felt was there's no concerted effort into directing that recreation. And that's part of the Office Outdoor Recreation focus, is to try to get out in front of some of the things that are going on to ensure that we're protecting critical habitat, making sure that wildlife corridors are protected with these outdoor rec products. And so our hope, Mr. Chairman, is this bill creates a trust fund that we can start growing, create the trust fund, start growing the corpus, and start using those earnings off of that corpus to continuously and perpetually fund the Office Outdoor Recreation. Starting out with very little money in the fund, it's not going to probably be as impactful. As we keep growing the trust fund in time, will be more impactful, and it'll be self-sustaining at that point. So that's basically the gist of the why behind the bill. During the interim, we had a lot of public testimony, and there'll probably be some more testimony today. A lot of which were, I think my favorite fishing hole is being overrun. Well, working with the Office of Tourism, we've created some grant funding on top of the ARPA funding that we got as well, to start developing some of these outdoor rec products. So instead of everybody loving your fishing hole, maybe we can create some access and some other developed outdoor rec products that we can start shifting these people to those areas. Dave calls it EDC. We got to educate our consumers. We want to make sure that the people that are coming know how to recreate in Wyoming, how we recreate in Wyoming, and how we want you to recreate when you come to Wyoming. And we worked with the Office of Tourism to create Why Responsibly. And I think it was greatly impactful during the COVID era. That's when it came out, which was perfectly timed, that we got that message out. And yes, there are some people, just like anything, you're going to see people not doing the best things, but hopefully the education piece is still going strong, and we're going to keep pushing that. Then you got the disbursement piece. If we're loving an area too much, how do we get them to disperse? Well, we need more product to disperse them. And so that's the other part that they're working on. And then there's going to be some areas where we might want to concentrate. Maybe we want to sacrifice 400 acres to develop an off-road play park to ensure that we're saving some wilderness or saving some critical habitat or the corridors. And so the educate, disperse, and concentrate piece is really key component to directing where people recreate, how they recreate, and start developing those products so we can get people where we want them to recreate. And so, Mr. Chairman, did I miss anything, Dave? With me here is Deputy Director Dave Glenn. Behind me, I also have the Office Outdoor Recreation Manager, Patrick Carrington. We also have members from Department of Game and Fish, as well as tourism as well. So, and they're willing to speak on behalf of the bill as well. And with that, I'd stand for any questions or however you'd like me to proceed.
Mr. Espy, do you want to take us through the bill?
Sure. Mr. Chairman and committee, the bill creates the Outdoor Rec Trust Fund. I'll just walk through the pages. Page 1 creates the trust fund account and as well as an income account. It talks about the distribution of funds, goes through requiring audits and reports and rulemaking, providing funding for the trust as well as any conforming amendments. Page 2, Mr. Chairman, the short title is the Outdoor Rec Trust Fund Act. Definitions, it talks about commission. Part of the conversation in the interim is we have a lot of boards and commissions within the state. We want to, how can we do this without adding another one? And we offered up the State Parks and Cultural Resource Commission as an opportunity to be able to use that existing commission to be the commission for this trust fund. The
Director
division
Westby,
is,
real quick, just for the edification of the committee, can you tell us a little bit more about committee, how those members get there, that kind of thing, or how they get appointed?
sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The commission is basically out of the 7 individual commissioners appointed by the governor, Senate confirmed bodies throughout the state. Thank you. The other definition is division. That's the Division of State Parks and Historic Sites. Income account is the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund income account. And then outdoor recreation infrastructure is defined as facilities, installations needed for public to access and enjoy Wyoming's outdoors. The trust fund account is defined there. And then, Mr. Chairman, middle of page 3 talks about the creation of and the trust funds. It's designed to account by law and all monies collected from federal. Basically, where we can collect these funds, it doesn't have to just come from the general fund or what have you. We can get it from federal grants, any contributions, grants, gifts, bequests, donations. The trust account is empowered to accept these grants, gifts, transfers. The funds deposited into the trust account shall be inviolate and constitute a perpetual trust, shall be invested by the state treasurer to obtain the highest return possible, and with obviously consistent with the preservation of the corpus. Page 4, subsection B there, the income account is where we're talking about the income account. It shall credit annually the income account and all earnings from the fund, both the income and the trust account. And in here during the interim, they talked about trying to get the corpus up to $50 million, and or we couldn't spend out of the income account until it hit $50 million or July 1, 2026 is what that stated. And then it goes on further. It says the legislature may appropriate funds directly to the trust fund or income account. And any funds that are without designation directly go to the income account. No funds shall be expended from the income account until appropriated by the legislature. Subsection C, any person that may grant, give, transfer, bequest, donate funds. And again, if it's not specifically in writing, it goes to the income account. Subsection D goes into legislative appropriation expenditure. So basically the legislature has to approve all the appropriations.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rusby, back to line 4, page 4, line 16, appropriated by the legislature. Is the idea here that every one of these projects would have to be approved and appropriated by the legislature?
Director Westby.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, it's a good question. I think the answer would be, I look at it very similar to like how the large project works with the WWNRT, the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust, where we'd have to bring the large projects over a certain threshold. That would have to probably be created with rules on what's that threshold. Otherwise, the actual authorization of appropriations would have to be definitely through the legislature.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So I guess with that, then we would be looking at in effect, as you said, large project, or we do this with cease and transfer, and those each year the legislature would be looking at a list of projects and a list of expenditures.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, I guess I would leave that to the legislative body. Right now, we're talking about very little funds to be able to appropriate. And I'm not sure at what level of detail you want to be a part of a $10,000 grant versus the large projects that I know Director Budd does with the large projects with the WWNRT. And I think what we would have to do is work through at what level do you want to see that authorization come through from a money perspective.
Another follow-up.
Chairman
So
Burkhart.
reading that last sentence, no funds shall be expended from the income account until appropriated by the legislature. I would read that very literally, that is every penny. So I think that's something that if we have a different thought or idea, we might want to take care of in the bill rather than let it hang out there. So just a thought. Thank you.
Director Westby?
Thank you. And I can see the confusion. I also, looking at from an efficiency standpoint, waiting every year to go through legislation to grant, $10,000 grants, whether that's efficient of your time, but and effectiveness of getting the funds on the ground as well. But definitely something that we can look at to clean up for sure. Continuing on, Mr. Chairman, I think we're on to subsection D on page 5. Expenditures from the income account shall only be for the following. No more than 80% of the funds in the income account per annum may be distributed for grants awarded by the commission planning, design, improvement, maintenance of existing or potential outdoor recreational infrastructure supported by local government. That's the key word there, supported by local government. A lot of these projects, we want to ensure that they have local support. We don't want to, again, parachute in and say, this is what you need. We want them coming to us with the grant application with their local support, whether it's a state project, a federal project, a tribal project. And these may include grants for the purpose of public access easements as well.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Angelos?
Thanks for coming, guys. Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry, I forget your name.
What, Darren?
Darren, thanks for coming. So I have a question on that. May include grants for the purchase of public access easements necessary to enhance the outdoor recreational infrastructure. That kind of makes me nervous. Private land could go to government land. What if the state decides that an easement is necessary?
Director Westby?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative. I think you're leaning towards eminent domain. One thing, again, I'll go back to we're not going to jump in, parachute in and say this needs to happen this way. We want local support. We want local landowner support to have this happen. The last thing we want to do is force any kind of recreation on anybody if they're not interested in doing so. So all parties would have to come to the table that say, yes, this access easement, not necessarily purchasing land from somebody, but just granting the access is important to get to these points. I think it's very, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I think the intent is to ensure that we have full support by everybody involved before it goes forward.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Representative?
I think the term necessary can be really confusing, and I think I've had people from my own community concerned about that word, so I just wanted to make sure that was brought to your attention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Representative Angelos, I think, when we get to work the bill, you're more than welcome to bring an amendment striking necessary. I think it still reads the same way as it was intended to be written and not necessarily in the context that you are. But anyway, continue on, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the question. It's something that we want to flush out too, because again, we do not want to come in and take over lands to make this happen. We want everybody at the table to make sure it's done right. Subsection II, no more than 20% of these funds in the income account per year can be expended on administrative expense. And a little bit of that, why the 20%? Again, we don't have the funds in our agency to stand up the Office of Outdoor Recreation. Currently, we're working through the Office of Tourism with some of their funds to get the Office of Outdoor Recreation going. The long-term goal of this this plan with the trust fund is to generate enough corpus, generate enough interest earnings on the corpus to where it will fully fund the Office of Outdoor Recreation operations, then also have enough money to grant out to these projects.
Chairman Burkhart?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Westby, just kind of a philosophical question. How do you feel about being able to take only 90% of the earnings into the income account and leave 5% of the earnings back into the trust account itself to help build that account. We in the state generally tend to take all of these earnings and spend them and don't build the corpus. How do you feel about something like that?
Mr.
Director.
Chairman, Representative Burkhart, we have this conversation internally. We're fiscally conservative like all of you as well. If we don't need the full 20%, it's going back into the corpus. The issue is right now we have zero, other than a partnership with Director Schober. And luckily we have that partnership. Otherwise, Patrick and his team could not be doing what they've been doing right now. And that's standing up a grant program to expend the ARPA funds that we got, and hopefully we'll be gracious enough that we can get another 12 million to grant out and really kickstart the projects that we have on the list right now. I guess going back on that, we have 71, almost $72 million worth of requests, just the first round. So we know the proof of concept, the need is out there. Patrick's finding every penny that he can to get it on the ground. So I appreciate the question. Right now we have zero. So 0% of zero is still zero. Even 20% of zero is still zero. But as the corpus grows, and if it gets above 50 million, where we think we need that, if we just do a basic 5% earning on that money, that 5% or 20% of that 50 million is about what he needs on an annual basis to run the office, operate the office. But like I said, fiscally conservative anything that we don't spend will go right back into growing that corpus. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director Westby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're on to page 6, 36-4204, the trust fund administration duties and responsibilities in the report. The commission will receive and evaluate all the applications. The commission shall annually report to the governor, the JAC, and this body no later than October 1. Any federal grants, state appropriations, contributions that are received will be credited to the Outdoor Rec Trust Fund, and income will also be reported. Grants awarded and dispersed by the commission will be in the report, as well as funds dispersed by the commission to the division as well. So just because we're a state entity doesn't mean that we can't apply for some of these funds as well, because we're an outdoor rec agency as well. Subsection C, the commission shall review and monitor the expenditures. The commission shall also adopt rules and regulations in accordance with the WPA, APA. And then we'll establish procedure for the grant application submittal, establish criteria for awarding these grants, establish criteria for requiring matching funds, evaluate, rank, and prioritize the proposals and I think this is important, with the emphasis on the projects that will have the greatest increase on statewide citizen utilization or outdoor recreation infrastructure. That was a pretty big conversation in the interim, Mr. Chairman, to ensure that that language was right. And Representative Winter, you probably remember that conversation as well. Subsection E, fulfilling this act, the commission may consult as necessary with other governmental agencies. You'll hear from some of them today as well. Any local, county, municipal governments. Representative Angelos, that's kind of where I was talking about. We want to make sure that we have local buy-in all the way through the process, and accept or decline any federal grants, contributions, all of that. We want to have that ability to accept, but also there's certain things, no matter how good it looks, may not be appropriate for the corpus and the fund to accept. So we want to have that flexibility to be able to turn away things that may not be appropriate. At the bottom of 8 is 36-4205, the disbursements of the income. Again, it's subject to application approval and legislative appropriation, and the commission may award grants consistent with the rules that the commission created. The commission shall have the discretion to determine the amount of money awarded under grant and any condition attached to the grant to the grantee for providing matching funds as well. On the biennial audit, the Department of Audit shall audit the trust account and the income account. And then section 2 on page 9 talks about creating a new subsection G with the statutes there, which are the pages 10 and 11 are the sales and use tax, 364104, and is the added subsection G where it talks about the outdoor rec trust fund. The commission shall administer that under that subsection, and then it goes into 3915.111 and 3916.111, which are the distributions of the sales and use tax. One sales and one is use tax. Basically the same language on both, where it's talking about deducting 5% of the state's share of the sales tax and 5% of the state's share of the use tax was discussed in the interim committee to start funding this grant or the trust fund. And right now this section 3 at the bottom of 11, Mr. Chairman, to wrap it up, is effective July 1, 2023.
Thank you, Director Espy. Committee, any questions? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Glenn.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Glenn, Deputy Director of Wyoming State Parks. I want to point out something just on the bottom of page 2 on line 21, where we define outdoor recreation infrastructure, because I think that's really important. We worked hard with TRW to make the TRWCR to make this as broad as possible. Sometimes when people think of outdoor recreation infrastructure, they think, oh, it's a mountain bike trail or a hiking trail. The way we've defined this, it could be a motorized trail, it could be shooting sports, it could be a bigger, broader array of kind of all things outdoor recreation. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn.
Thank you.
Committee, any questions? All right, let's go to additional testimony. If you guys just hang around, I'm sure we'll have you back up here. Any other state agencies? Mr. Nesvik, obviously, I know who you are, but just if you wouldn't mind announcing yourself, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Brian Nesvik, Director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. Good to see new faces on the committee. I look forward to having the opportunity to meet the 3 or 4 of you that I don't know. Our lead on this particular bill has been Deputy Director Angie Bruce, and I'm going to turn the mic over to her to talk about the game and fish perspective on this. I think you'll find it rather brief and concise.
Deputy Director Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Thanks to Director Westby for really laying out the purpose and the need for this. As you know, recreation is increasing, and this is the time to shape it as it goes into the future. There's a growing body of evidence to show possible impacts to wildlife with different types of recreation. And so we are always concerned about what that future of recreation is in Wyoming. However, we already work very closely with state parks and feel we can continue to do so in this effort as well. And page 8, where it said consult when necessary with other state agencies, that is nice to see in there, and we appreciate that. We may look for something a little stronger to ensure that the conversation takes place with us. Director Westby talked about those local planning efforts. And our folks, our regional folks, are involved in those. And so that's really where all the work happens, is on the ground with the community. But I think there could be a place where they reach out, the applicants, to the Game and Fish for us to evaluate the fish and wildlife impacts of any possible future recreational infrastructure on the landscape. We currently do this with a variety of development in the state, anywhere from oil and gas development to solar to wind farms to county quarry projects. It's very common what we do day to day. Over 800 a year, we review projects. So I think we could do a pretty streamlined system where we could review the project and provide feedback is really what we're doing. We're not permitting in any way, shape, or form, but we are either saying, yes, great project, go forward, or here's a few concerns we have and maybe some things to think about in tweaking the project to have less impacts on wildlife. So with that, I'll just stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Storr.
Mr. Chairman, Deputy Director Bruce, I'm just curious, what in the recent past have you come across as far as being specific conflicts with wildlife in the outdoor recreation area?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, the hard data is not as heavy as we would like it, but we do have a few incidents where there is a peer-reviewed paper that document impacts. A few recent efforts have been to evaluate the impact of backcountry, cross-country skiing in your neck of the woods, and bighorn sheep impacts. There's also been a study in northern Colorado with same skiing and effects on elk. So a lot of our evidence right now is anecdotal, but there's a growing body of concern, and we're starting to evaluate it closer.
Any follow-up? Representative Storer? Any other questions? Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind sticking around just in case we need you back up here. Any other state agencies? Director Schober.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Diane Schober. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Office of Tourism. And certainly, you've heard that we work in close partnership with the Division of State Parks and Cultural Resources, their common objectives. Our agency is responsible for growing the visitor in Wyoming, and predominantly that's done through inspirational marketing to have visitors come to Wyoming and experience all of the great things that are to see. But one of the sometimes one of the challenges that we have is in lesser known locales, the product isn't developed. So you can't really have people stay over in areas if there's not something for them to do or that infrastructure. And therefore, when we look at these partnerships with agencies like, State Parks and Cultural Resources and the Office of Outdoor Recreation, this is an opportunity for, through the funding of,
Your voice just naturally projects well, so I thought the mic was on.
Mr. Chairman, it has never been said, please, Diane, speak up. We cannot hear you.
Undoubtedly.
I've never known that to ever be
Undoubtedly.
requested of me. So thanks. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. So with this trust fund and what the Office of Outdoor Recreation could do would certainly be a benefactor in being able to disperse the visitor economy and grow it in all 23 counties across the state of Wyoming. And we certainly, as we work with them on many things that we've already been doing, Game and Fish, the Office of Tourism, State Parks and Cultural Resources, many times the Department of Transportation, we're looking at that sweet spot where our goals and objectives intersect and how we can elevate an opportunity. And so just speaking on behalf of the establishment of the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, we see this as an opportunity to leverage those common objectives. And certainly our office remains committed to working with the Office of Outdoor Recreation to continue to see this be a viable part of our economy. With that, I would stand for questions.
Questions, committee? Excellent. Thank you so much. We'll probably bring you back up to speak to the amendment at some point, but thank you, Director. Any other state agencies? Anybody else? All right, so we're going to go to any legislators. Representative Haraldson, I know why you're here. Let's go ahead and open up to public testimony. Let's let Mr. Ryman come up first, if that's okay. I know he's in a little bit of a rush, so I gave him the courtesy of letting him testify first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann. Most of you will get to know me in my professional capacity as the Executive Director of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, and I certainly expect that they will lend their voice to this particular topic. But I come to you today from a personal perspective relative to my interest in outdoor recreation. Very avid mountain biker. In fact, I've written a guidebook about that particular activity. I don't come here to sell that, but just to share that perspective. As I came to this conversation, there were a couple of topics that were being discussed at the time. One was a mountain bike user fee within the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. Another one was a bill that you considered last week relative to an active transportation grant program. I actually support both of those concepts, but I was rather concerned, one with a price tag of one and the impact of the other, and being able to ensure that we had a long-term sustainable solution to support our outdoor recreation economy in the state of Wyoming. I came to the committee this summer and presented 52 concepts in a 9-page document that I'm very happy to share with you, which outlined how other states and jurisdictions around the world are trying to do this work. That document identified 16 different mechanisms that again, those jurisdictions are using. My interests were, number one, to assist the department in funding the Office of Outdoor Recreation. Number two, to ensure that there was trail and pathway funding. And number three, that our local parks and recreation assets could be enhanced, whether that's a community city park or our state parks or others that exist around the state. I also personally am very interested in the intersection of this topic with safe pathways to school and ensuring that our students can not only get to school, but then ultimately to recreation assets. So I come to with all of that. I don't want to bore you with all the details of those different mechanisms, other than to say that I understand the concern around the sales tax provisions of this bill. I would advocate that you identify a different funding solution. I know you're going to discuss one of those that I think is a solid solution for you, and I would support that. I also wanted to just quickly talk to the concept that Representative Burkhart talked about in terms of returning a percentage back to the corpus of this fund. That is a concept that we introduced to the committee. It was at the end of their time, and so it wasn't taken up. I think they were perhaps interested in the concept. Representative Burkhart, what I would suggest to you is that you could take 10% of the grant funding that would be going out to locals and put that back into the corpus. I understand that that would have a lesser impact in terms of the grants that could be awarded on the front end, but it helps grow the corpus over time and ensures that there's a greater pot to work from at a later point in time. So I would certainly support that concept if you are going to move forward with that. Mr. Chairman, with that, I know you've got lots of others, and I've got other business and other committees to take care of. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Committee, any questions? Thank you very much. Actually, let's do one at a time real quick. Mr. Brown?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Chris Brown, representing Wyoming Hospitality and Travel Coalition. Our membership consists of about 500 lodging properties, restaurants, attractions, local tourism entities, et cetera, all across the state. And we stand in support of the bill. Tourism and hospitality plays a huge role in the state's economy. In 2021, tourism and hospitality helped generate $243 million in local and state sales tax or local and state tax revenue across the state. And we're also the highest private sector employer in the state, employing more than 30,000 employees. As Director Schobert alluded to earlier, one of the biggest challenges of spreading tourism out across the state is often the lack of product development. And spreading tourists around the state is the best way for us to grow the state's second largest industry. We see this bill as having the potential to positively impact all 23 counties. When I think of another trust fund, the Wildlife Trust Fund, that has had a positive impact in all 23 counties across the state. And I think that this bill has that potential as well. Representative Angelos, when we talked about the Pathways bill earlier this week, we heard your reference to if this has the potential to be a positive impact on the tourism economy, why wouldn't tourism help fund that? And I had been proactively meeting with Director Schober and Director Westby on the amendment that I believe you all will be considering at the end of this bill to strike the existing funding mechanism within the bill and fund this bill through the special projects and reserve account from the Office of Tourism. We stand in support of that amendment. And so, Mr. Chairman, we feel like this is a good bill. It offers a real opportunity to build out outdoor recreation product across the state. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Committee, any questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Jess Johnson. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And I just wanted to chat a little bit about how exciting it is to see us starting to get our ducks in a row, looking at recreation, how we handle it, how we plan it, how we do it smartly. I think this is a great step in that direction, and as an organization that's wholeheartedly supported WWNRT from the very beginning, we see this as something similar. We do have some concerns that I think were referenced earlier. You know, I think from the hunting voice, we often end up a little bit at odds with some of the other recreation community, particularly because of wildlife impact and our concerns around that. I have sent you all an amendment, and there should be a hard copy floor handout as well that is a suggestion from our organization on what would sort of make us a little more comfortable on making sure that we look at the wildlife impact before these grants even get to where they're going. So we're asking in this amendment, and it'll be on page 9, subsection B, and it'll be adding in there, what we are asking is just to add a requirement that the applicants consult with their game and fish, whether it's local or whether it's, I think in the headquarters side, can be figured out in rules and figured out later, but this is just asking that a consultation happens, that they can talk with folks, see if they're, you know, putting anything in critical mule deer. We, you know, Lord knows we want to do anything with sage grouse and anything else. And this just sort of gets our ducks in a row. So we make sure that we're doing good by the wildlife while we're also doing good by our state and our citizens and our recreationists. I would like to add that I think we're really excited about some of this because as I understand it, because of they have broadened this bill, some of these grants could be used for shooting ranges. And you know, with the R3, whether it's archery, whether it's rifle, whatever it is, we're fully in support of seeing those in some of the other places. And you know, there is some stipulations with federal funding. So this frees this up. And we, you know, I love the idea of what this could go towards, especially to help the hunting community, but the wildlife concern is a real one. So I have a recommendation of an amendment before you. And so it'll be page 9, subsection B, and it'll be line 9. And it's just to add the words, to consult with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department prior to application. And that'll finish out the subsection to provide matching funds or other in-kind contributions. That's a recommendation. We love this idea. We love where it's going, but there are some wildlife concerns, and I feel like this will alleviate them from the hunting voice.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Committee, any questions? Representative Burkhart.
Ms. Johnson, excuse me, a quick question. Your suggested amendment says to consult with them. Generally, that just means talk and you walk away. Do you want anything done besides the consulting, such as implementing recommendations or anything like that?
Mr. Chairman? Representative Burkhart, it does say consult, and I had reached out to the department and asked probably what would be the best kind of language to do what we do. And I think with their great relationships with other agencies and the fact that this is fairly regular discussion between agencies around this, that this just kind of adds that little extra in statute certification that that's going to happen. I am open if you and the body wants to do a more prescriptive amendment. I'm certainly open to that. This was sort of the come around because of the discussion I had with the department.
Thank you.
Representative Burkhart, any follow-up? Any other questions, committee? Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Public testimony? Come on up. And please just make sure to state your name and who you represent.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Steph Kessler, and I'm here representing Wyoming Pathways, and with me also is Mike Kusick, who is our executive director. Wyoming Pathways supports this bill, and we worked during the interim with the committee to help develop it. I'm going to start off in some conversation, and then Mike's going to take it from there. I provided for you all a fact sheet that I hope you got with some graphs. And I'm not going to review that, but just make some points about some materials on there. I think the point that we mostly want to make about outdoor recreation is that it's big business. I used to hear several decades ago in Wyoming that people said a backpacker would just, in his visit in Wyoming, only change his t-shirt and a $10 bill. That is no longer the case today. This is a very moneyed crowd, dropping a lot of revenue in our state. An average mountain bike is about $5,000. My son just recently asked for a pair of rock climbing shoes for Christmas that were over $300. A pair of newfangled backcountry AT skis, boots, the whole deal, are over $2,000. And whereas in the past, maybe a backpacker would disperse into the mountains for a week or two, my observation is that the outdoor recreation boom in Wyoming is more about front country recreation. People want to climb, bike, ski, or fish during the day, and then enjoy our coffee shops, local brew pubs, restaurants, motels, and small town life that we have to offer. These are folks visiting us from tech hubs in Salt Lake City or Colorado with money to spend. This fact sheet, you can see some data about our outdoor rec industry. It's big and it's growing. We're competing with Alaska and Hawaii in the top 3 states for percentage of state GDP in this sector. Our outdoor rec employment has grown nearly faster than any other state, and overall the industry is outperforming the rest of the US economy by far. All of these reasons are why we believe HB 74 is much needed. The outdoor recreation boom is here now. Wyoming needs to put itself in the driver's seat of this boom, capturing its revenue and guiding it for our needs and our values, or it will run us over. HB 74 does that by creating a homegrown, Wyoming-led process for helping communities with their needs on our terms. And we need to do this for ourselves, as well as for the tourists and visitors. You'll see on the fact sheet the graph regarding Wyoming. We visit our public land resources more than any other state in the United States. We need the tools that HB 74 will provide to mitigate and guide recreational use so that we can maintain what we love about Wyoming for the future. And some final points just about this industry overall. It is an amenity that attracts new businesses and workers. We offer the entrepreneur or businessman who can develop or bring his business anywhere a great choice for quality of life. Imagine living where you and your employees can take their lunch break for a quick hike, a bike ride, or fish a trout stream before work. Our digital economy allows for this locational flexibility. Outdoor rec investment not only brings tourists, but also new residents and talent, retirees, young people, tax revenues, and support for our Main Street stores and businesses.
Thank you, Chairman Western. Committee, thanks for your time. I would add to that, the reason we're seeing such a clamor for bills like this and for funding is we have the great need for facilities. Last week with the House Bill 48, we heard the folks from State Park and Outdoor Rec talk about the growth of Kurt Gowdy and Glendo, noting how on a busy weekend, Glendo is the 3rd biggest community in the state of Wyoming. When people go camping at Glendo originally, it wasn't to be around 30,000 other friends and neighbors, it was to get away from it and have that kind of experience. Kurt Gowdy's the same way. I lived in Laramie in the early 2000s and was a mountain biker back then. And when Kurt Gowdy first opened, parking lot was always available with a few spaces and you hardly ever saw anybody. Now that parking lot is 6 figures plus a year, high 6 figures plus a year in visitation, and 60% of those people are coming from out of state, many times from our friends in the South. And those folks are so crowded, they think Kurt Gowdy is currently not that crowded. And so what's happening is the rest of us are wondering where to go, and we're creating that space. And a lot of the out-of-state visitors who are newer to our economy, or excuse me, to our communities, are doing things like boondocking, camping all over the forest or the BLM. If you've been out to Happy Jack or Vita Vu on a summer afternoon, you'll find, looks like maybe people have created their own neighborhood out there and they're living for the summer. The same's true in the Teton Valley. They're just pulling off and parking and camping and spending all kinds of time enjoying the great outdoors. That's happening when folks build trails too. We don't have the facilities or the amenities to meet the need. And as many people have mentioned, Director Westby nailed it, lots of missed opportunities. In my world with my colleagues, we talk about something Ms. Kessler mentioned, that is we've got to capture the economy that's hiking on our trails outside of our towns. Oftentimes they're leaving. They're coming for a hike and they're heading out. We have a lot of folks coming from Salt Lake to climb at Wild Iris. If you know where that is, they're coming through maybe Farson and grabbing an ice cream cone and heading back to Salt Lake. We need to figure out a way to capture this economy that's hiking and biking and fishing and recreating in motorized ways all across our state, and this bill will do that. We'll create facilities that put folks where they belong in terms of our public lands management plans. We'll create facilities that are sustainably built, so there's very little maintenance, and also add the amenities that encourage them to stay. I mentioned last week, and I'll mention it again, one of my favorite communities, and I'm sure yours too, is Thermopolis, Wyoming. That is a town that people go to all the time anyway, year-round, just for the hot springs and the blue ribbon fishing and the floating of the river. Now they have 13 miles of single track from town. We call that kind of a program Main Street to the Mountains. You park your car downtown, you head out and mountain bike, and you come back and your car is parked right where you want to have a sandwich and a beer. You're not at a trailhead 20 miles from town. We're making it easy for folks to spend their money in our communities. These expenses are low on the front end. They yield year-over-year return on investment and require very little maintenance. Stand for any questions, but I'm very excited to see this move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Cusack. Any questions? Committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Any other public testimony? Mr. Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau, in opposition to this bill. My organization does not appreciate having these type of funds, these perpetual funds set up. We would rather, if it's a good project, have the legislature look at it. So sitting in opposition to the bill to have this trust fund set up, should this bill go forward, there's a few changes I would request. But actually, there's one thing I would like to keep in there, and that would be to have the legislature have the authority over disbursement of funds. We believe it's important to have an elected body of the legislature disperse the funds rather than an appointed body of the commission disperse the funds. So we would like to have that stay in there should the bill go forward. A couple other changes I would ask for on page 5, line 17. That's what it is on my computer. I don't know. But it deals with the easements. Should that go in there, I would like to have it that it can only be a term easement. I would suggest no longer than 30 years. So that as things change, new terms can be negotiated to take care of things that change over time and potential problems. I'll give an example of one of my members up in Hot Springs County. When an easement was put through the property he now owns, it wasn't a problem. A few fishermen. The easement is for fishing, boating, and waterfowl hunting. When it first opened up, wasn't any problem. As more people came out and used it, they were using it for inappropriate purposes, such as picnicking. I mean, it wasn't what the easement was for, and they're coming right through the private property. To getting those terms of the easements enforced has essentially been, for a while, was non-happening. The easement wasn't being enforced. And then after my member met with an agency and local law enforcement in order, if somebody was trespassing using that easement, for unauthorized purposes. Trespassing was not on the table unless that had been caught 3 times. I realize that's a local enforcement issue, but that's why if we keep these a term easement, new aspects can be brought in and we can renegotiate those. They can become perpetual, but I would ask that that be limited to a 30-year lifespan. So as things change, we can adapt for them, but not a big fan of perpetual easements. On page, another change I would ask would be on what is my page 8, line 12, looking through my focals and my bifocals. The E(i), consult as necessary with other governmental agencies, et cetera. I would ask that you strike out the as necessary. I believe that's a little, I don't know what it really means. So I just have it consult rather and drop out the as necessary. Again, Mr. Chairman, committee, sitting against the bill, but should the bill go forward, one thing to keep in there, 2 things to change. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would sit for any questions committee may have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Moline. Committee, any questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moline. Any other public testimony? Welcome to committee. If you wouldn't mind just stating your name and who you're with, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. My name is Amelia Howe. I'm Trout Unlimited's Wyoming Field Manager. I would like to express that I'm extremely grateful to see the intention being put forth behind recreation tourism in the state. I think thinking about this through a sustainability lens as well as its economic impact to the state really matters, especially when it comes to wildlife impacts. I would just like to state my support for Ms. Johnson's aforementioned amendment to consult Wyoming Game and Fish when we are considering grant applications for this program. We need to remember that wildlife is what brings so many people to the state, and both on the terrestrial and aquatic side. So if we can encourage people to do so sustainably through these projects, that would be wonderful, and we would like to support the bill when we see amendments that also protect wildlife. Thank you for your time.
You, Ms. Howe. Hang on one sec. Committee, any questions? Thank you so much. Any other public testimony in the room before we go online? All right, let's head out to the Zoom world.
We have 4 people with their hands raised.
Is Mark White's one of the ones with his hands raised? I'm gonna be a little biased. He's a Sheridan guy, so we're gonna let him in first.
What did you say? You want him brought in?
Yes, please.
Mr. Whites, you are in the room, so if you want to unmute and turn on your camera, you should be good to go.
Mark, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Excellent. Mark, I know who you are, and I'm really glad you're testifying, but if you wouldn't mind just stating your name and who you're with for the committee, please.
Thank you, Chairman Western. I'm Mark Whites, and I'm a citizen representing myself. I did have the pleasure of sitting on the Governor's Outdoor Recreation Task Force, and I'd like to share a few things from that experience and report. I'm also one of the founding board members for Antelope Butte Foundation. Our first objective was to reopen the shuttered Antelope Butte ski area as a year-round mountain recreation area, which we successfully have done over the last 10 years. I could go on for a long time about that, but I won't. But the point about that is we've created a number of jobs and also all kinds of opportunity for youth and beginners. But back to the point of my testimony, first off, I just want to give my full-throated support for this. When I went through the Governor's Outdoor Recreation Task Force, I was surprised at several things. I've always considered to be Wyoming a recreational paradise. And as you have heard, it's an economic engine. What I was surprised to find at that time, and it's been about 5 years ago, is that of the 11 Western states, when it comes to dollars generated and jobs generated, Wyoming was 11th. And if you added Nebraska, we were 12th. I think many of us were shocked to find out that we were that far behind, but some also realized that there was a silver lining, and that is that our recreation has not gotten out of hand as, let's say, some of our neighbors to the south. Now, since COVID and over the last several years, I'm sure some of you have had your favorite fishing spots invaded and are saying, wait a minute, maybe the horse is out of the barn, but there's nowhere to go but up. Now, those numbers may have changed a bit over the last 5 years, but point being, there's nowhere to go but up with the economic opportunities associated with recreation. Another thing that surprised me, because I'm generally a non-motorized user who sometimes gets surprised by motorized users or others who have more horsepower or noise at their disposal, is that those motorized users don't like encountering by surprise equestrians or mountain bikers or hikers any more than we like to be surprised by them. And I was really surprised to hear how much they appreciated purpose-built areas. And I'll just use one gentleman's example who said, if we could have a dunes riding facility north of Casper in the sand dunes that we could build features into, we would prefer to go there than just rambling around on dirt roads. And I thought, wow, that surprises me. I think that these purpose-built facilities and ideas could help to reduce conflicts. And then the last thing, and I'm echoing what a few other people have said, is that having some infrastructure and facilities, and I love the example of the Thermopolis example where the facilities were built right in town, that having those facilities available will allow and encourage people to concentrate their impacts. And just to use an example, in the Bighorns, we have some campgrounds where people can concentrate their impacts, their fires, their toilet use, but we also have dispersed camping. And what we learned in the Outdoor Recreation Task Force, and what I would advocate for, is that by concentrating these efforts, you can not only concentrate the impacts, let's say sewage or trash, but you can also offer first aid facilities and communications so that people aren't dispersed everywhere and getting in all kinds of troubles. So I just want to close by saying again that I appreciate this bill being written. I give it my full-throated support, and I will take any questions, and if not, then yield back to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Seeing none. Mark, good to see you. Thanks so much for testifying.
Thank you, Chairman Western.
Let's see, next is Ms. Lauren Hirschap. Is she available to testify?
Yes, she is.
Let's let her in.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Loud
All
and clear. Go ahead and just state your name and who you're with, please, for the committee.
My name is Lauren Hirschap, and I am the owner and CEO of Brunton, a compass and professional transit manufacturer here in Riverton. And I just want to preface this by saying that our internet connection has been super spotty in the last 20 minutes. So if I cut out suddenly, I apologize. I am strongly in favor of this bill. I actually testified a few years ago at the committee meeting in Du Bois when I was wearing a different hat. I was formerly the executive director of the WYO Climbers and the International Climbers Festival. And rock climbing is actually what brought my husband and I here to Wyoming, and the reason we stayed. And it put us in a position to purchase one of Wyoming's oldest outdoor recreation brands and keep it here, not only in the US, but in Wyoming. And we're really proud of that, and see outdoor recreation as a really important part of not only our lives, but as an important part of our state, as we're talking about today. And in my former role, I was on the other end of trying to get funding actually for several projects related to climbing infrastructure. And the competition for grant funds is so tough out there. And it was several years ago, right when the Office of Outdoor Rec was forming, when the Wind River Outdoor Recreation Collaborative was forming, which I'm still a part of. And so through the wearing of these different hats, I just really recognize the challenges that exist for securing funding, for steering outdoor recreation in a way that isn't reactive, but is proactive. We all many of us have moved to this state for the outdoor recreation. And because of its low crowds and the scenery and the value and the special nature of this state. And we don't want it to become yet another example of poorly managed outdoor recreation. I believe that this bill would help be a step in the right direction towards setting up the proper funding mechanism to help steer things in the right direction, so that this is a state where we all can continue to recreate and our kids can continue to recreate for years to come. So thank you for the chance. I hope that you were able to hear me throughout that statement, but let me know if you have any questions.
We could hear you loud and clear.
Great.
Any questions from Ms. Hirschap, committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Two people still have their hand raised, Josh Metten and Sarah Brown Matthews.
Let's let in Ms. Brown Matthews, please. Sir, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you so much. Just make sure to state your name, who you're with, and we need time to work the billing committee, so let's try to keep our comments relatively brief, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and committee. My name is Sarah Brown Matthews. I'm the Executive Director of Pilot Hill, Inc., and we are here to speak in favor of this thoughtful legislation, House Bill 74, and the establishment of a Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund. My comments will occasionally reference Pilot Hill Recreation and Wildlife Habitat Management Area, which just happens to be over the hill from all of you in Cheyenne. But I also want to emphasize in all of this that I'm just using Pilot Hill as one example of the many projects across our state that are truly community-driven efforts to do thoughtful strategic community planning and that have the potential to enhance both our community health for our Wyoming citizens and spur economic growth while protecting our really treasured natural landscapes. There's a couple of questions that came up on the panel that I will kind of address quickly here. One is the idea of how we make sure that wildlife needs are considered in all of this planning process. I think that our Wyoming citizens across the state and the state Parks Department efforts at really making sure these are community-driven efforts will solve that need. Here in Albany County, the citizens, over 1,000 people, came together to think about the land use plan for Pilot Hill. And in doing so, they designated half of the property as a wildlife habitat management area that provides for critical wildlife habitat protection and hunting for our citizens, and half of the area to be developed more for the recreational needs of trail users for hiking, biking, and horseback riding. They also have been partnered with us through Wyoming Game and Fish and the University of Wyoming, that is one of the easement access providers for this property, to help with research on how our increased use of the property is impacting wildlife movement on the property. That research, again, being conducted by the University of Wyoming in partnership with Pilot Hill and Game and Fish, will help inform projects throughout the state for years to come, and hopefully across the nation, as we all begin to look at how we can recreate responsibly with our wildlife partners that also call this beautiful property home. This bill supports partnerships like this, and it supports creative community efforts to really address the needs of their citizens and their community investment needs. Laramie needs to diversify the community. We are so blessed by having the University of Wyoming as our main employer in our community, but we need to diversify. We don't have other opportunities to really create a tax basis that supports Albany County. So recreation sites that would be supported through this Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund are critical in nature for our long-term sustainability. We estimate it'll probably run at least $6 million for us to fully develop Pilot Hill's infrastructure. That's basic trailheads and user amenities like restroom facilities and trash cans and trails. But we also know through research that's been done for us by the university's Center for Business and Economic Analysis that will return over $5 million in additional revenue to southeastern Wyoming communities. And that includes Cheyenne and Centennial, Wyoming, and Rock Springs or Rock River, all of the small communities that are part of Albany County. So again, I just am here to encourage you to thoughtfully consider House Bill 74, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Brown Matthews. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. I think there's, or was there one more?
Bringing Josh Mitten into the room.
Josh Mitten, please bring him in.
He's in the room. He needs to unmute.
Josh, can you hear us okay?
Yep. You hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Please state your name, who you're with.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Josh Metten, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. I'm the Wyoming Community Partnerships Coordinator, and I live in Cody, Wyoming. The mission of the TRCP is to guarantee all Americans quality places to hunt and fish. We feel that if managed carefully to address negative wildlife impacts, the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund will be a great contribution to our mission and the priorities of Wyoming sports people. We agree with our colleagues at the Wyoming Wildlife Federation and Trout Unlimited that in order for this trust fund to be successful, wildlife concerns must be addressed and support the proposed amendment. We're also confident that Wyoming State Parks, the Wyoming Game and Fish and other stakeholders are up to the task of mitigating impacts to wildlife. The Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund will create a dedicated funding source that will help local communities with important outdoor infrastructure. I'm an avid sportsman in Park County, and I greatly appreciate and benefit from existing infrastructure that we have here in this area, such as the Cody Archery Range, boat ramps along the Shoshone River, trail access, and other existing infrastructure. Hunters and anglers across the state stand to benefit from funding for similar projects. And we ask you to vote yes on House Bill 74. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mitten. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Chairman Mara Gans has her hand raised.
Say that one more time, Barb. Who is it?
Mara Gans.
Oh.
She's on the list, second from the top.
Oh, there she is. Bring her on in.
Hello, thank you all for having me. My name is Mara Gans, and as a longtime citizen of Wyoming, I want to express my support for House Bill 74. I was born and raised in Fremont County and left the state after high school. And since then, I've lived across the US, Washington, Vermont, Utah, Arizona, California. However, the amazing outdoor recreation opportunities here in Wyoming have continually pulled me back home. I recently obtained my master's degree and accepted a full-time job teaching with Central Wyoming College in Fremont County. And access to outdoor recreation is a key part of what brought me back here and why I hope to stay in Wyoming for a long time to continue to contribute to this community. And so I think it's important to emphasize that supporting outdoor recreation opportunities in Wyoming is not just about bringing tourists in or bringing new people into the state, but it's also about holding on to the quality and talented people who already live in Wyoming, who grew up here. And I know I'm not the only one this applies to. I have recently seen several of my high school friends from around the state, people from Lander, Pinedale, Casper, moving back to Wyoming, primarily for its outdoor recreation opportunities. And then lastly, I just want to emphasize how important outdoor rec opportunities are, such as trails, parking lots, boat ramps, facilities, are to my job as an educator or a professor at Central Wyoming College. I teach geography, geology, and earth science, and being able to take my students outside is key to teaching them and inspiring them to understand the unique physical landscape of Wyoming, whether they go to work for a Forest Service, a nonprofit, an oil and gas company. Understanding the landscape of Wyoming is crucial to their education, and I'm so grateful for our outdoor recreation facilities to support that. So for those reasons, as a citizen and as a teacher in the state, I strongly support this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gans. Hang on one second. Any questions, Ms. Gans, committee? Seeing none, thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony. One last crack. Any other public testimony? Anybody in the audience? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Larson. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Storer. Committee discussion. I know we've got a couple of amendments here that I think will certainly make it more palatable, certainly from a funding perspective. Just to give you guys a little bit of context.
Mr. Chairman, before
Chairman
discussion,
Burkhart.
before we get to the amendments.
Chairman Burkhart, go for it.
So, thank you. Based on all the discussion, all the testimony, I'm just wondering if we wouldn't be better off just giving the money to Game and Fish. Everybody seems to find the wildlife as the driving factor behind this, and no sense creating another one. Why don't we just give Game and Fish 50 million?
Chairman Burkhart, that is an option that we can't consider.
So I've heard that from agencies. I've heard it from the people who testified in the room and here. I have to really wonder why we're doing this if the only reason is the wildlife, and we already have an agency that deals with that. Just a thought.
Committee, any other comments or concerns? Let's go ahead and just kind of work the bill. Any amendments or discussion on page 1? On page 2? Page 3? Page 4? So Representative Storer, the chairman cannot actually bring an amendment. Once we kind of get to that part, we can really discuss it now, I suppose. The background information on the amendment that's before you really has to do with the funding of it. As it's written, it's diverting money from the sales tax, which suffice it to say, I think some folks would be quite concerned about if that remains in there. So Chairman Newsom was working on an amendment for this bill. Obviously, she kind of got detained for obvious reasons, and so she asked me to pick up the amendment, and it was drafted in consultation both with the Department of Tourism and with the state parks. And so essentially what it's doing is it's pulling money from the Department of Tourism into the income account. As you can kind of see, it deletes all the language that pulled it from the sales tax, and it deletes some of the language on page 4. So that's
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman Burkhart.
if I might ask a question, we are dealing with the proposed amendment with your name on it. Am I
Correct.
correct? Okay. Has that amendment been moved and seconded?
It has not.
Okay. Is this the appropriate place? Because we start on line 4.
It is.
Okay. I will move the amendment.
It's been moved by Representative Burkhart, seconded by Representative Larson.
I'm just keeping us on track.
Discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, you may want to discuss the amendment for the people in the audience so they know what we're discussing.
So the amendment, again, it strikes all the language, diverting it from the sales tax, and then it pulls that money from the reserve account for the Department of Tourism. It's an appropriation of $6 million from the Wyoming Tourism Reserve and Projects account to the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund account for the purposes of administering this act. Pending legislative approval, this shall be a recurring biennial appropriation. This appropriation shall not be transferred or expended for any other purpose, notwithstanding Wyoming statutes, Title IX. This appropriation shall remain in effect and not lapse or revert at the end of the fiscal period except upon further legislative action. Any further discussion, committee? Question on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That amendment is adopted. We're back on the bill. Any further amendments on page 4?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Angelos?
I would like to, I would like a little more clarification on no funds shall be expended from the income account until appropriated by the legislature. I mean, are we gonna go all funds? Are we gonna have a certain amount? I think we need to maybe amend this to be a little more clear.
Committee, any discussion? Ms. Angelos, I'm certainly open to an amendment like that if you want to put a cap, because I think it reads, I interpret the same way you do, that kind of like the large projects funding bill, where we have to authorize this on an annual or biannual or biennium basis. So if you'd like to bring an amendment, you're welcome to.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Storr.
related to that. So just to be clear, with the amendment we just passed, we're putting $6 million from tourism into the trust account,
Correct.
but no money currently into the income account. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So just for reference, when the WWNRT Trust was created in 2005, the initial trust account was funded at 15 million and 300,000 in income. And large projects essentially required, there is a board in that case, but it required any projects over 200,000 to come in the large project group annually to be approved by the legislature. So if the goal is to create something like that, I could support that. I probably want to put it at something like 250,000 given inflation these days. So we could suggest that large projects over 250,000 would need approval by the legislature. I'm not quite sure how to work that in the language.
Representative Angelos, is that
Figure
a
it out.
friendly amendment?
I think that is Mr. Chairman, I think that is a friendly amendment. I definitely want to make sure legislature is approving these. So we could work in 250,000. We just approved that on the college commission. So
So do you have an idea of the specific wording? You could say no funds shall be expended over $250,000. Is that?
For an individual project?
Yes. That is
Page
page 2,
4.
line 15, or excuse me, page 4, line 15, pardon me. Representative Angelos, does that work for you?
let me think about wording. Can I do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, you can go on.
So while they're still contemplating the amendment, let's kind of keep going through some of the other pages. Page 5.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Burkhart.
Okay, page 5, line 18. After infrastructure, a new sentence to read. And if I can get a second on this, I will explain it. Grants shall be provided to all counties based on the county's inverse proportional share of tourism income as determined by the Department of Tourism.
Barb, do you got that, or do you want some?
I can give it to Barb.
Repeat himself.
Yeah. You want me to repeat it now, Barb, or just give it to you in writing? Okay.
So just maybe, Chairman Burkhart, if you could repeat that one more time for the committee so we can discuss
Grants
it.
shall be provided to all counties based on the county's inverse proportional share of tourism income as determined by the Department of Tourism.
Representative, could you maybe just elaborate on your intent or your thinking behind that?
Okay, there's no second.
Is there a second?
Oh, okay. Representative Winters.
Representative Winters, second.
Normally, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Normally, all of this money seems to go to the northwest corner of the state when our eastern central counties get little. Some of the southwestern counties get little. Some of the smaller counties get little of this tourism money, and this just says put the money where there might be the greatest need in those small counties. Frankly, some of the counties in the northwest corner of the state get a tremendous amount of tourism money and other funds and benefits where other counties don't, and this just evens out the expenditures and the benefits.
Representative Storer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burkhart, I appreciate your intent, I think. And frankly, it's really, I would say that the delegation from the northwest part of the state would like to see tourism spread out through the rest of the state as well. It does feel a little prescriptive, however, in asking the agency to rank projects based on what you said. I'm just wondering if there's another way to say we want to see these funds expended in places that haven't had traditional outdoor recreational investments.
Committee, any further discussion? Representative Byron?
I also stand against the amendment, and I think that this bill certainly allows for equal grant opportunities throughout the entire state and is worded appropriately. So just for the record, I do stand against that amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Angelos?
I would be in support of the amendment because I think what we're dealing with is unelected officials, a committee who gets to determine, and it's pretty vague on those determining of those grants. So, that's important to distribute that, I feel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Burkhart's amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no.
No.
Chairs and now, let's just do a show of hands. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the majority. Sandy's out here. Who else raised their hand? Here, let's just show the hands again.
Show of
please.
hands
Just
again.
for Representative Burkhart. If all those opposed, excuse me, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 ayes. That amendment is adopted.
Mr. Chairman, I'll give that to Barb in writing.
Okay, please do. Thank you. All right, back on the bill. Page 6.
Oh, can we, Mr. Chairman?
Are you ready to go back to yours?
We go back to 5?
Sure.
I would like to amend where it says may include grants for the purchase of public access easements necessary to enhance the outdoor recreation infrastructure. Let's use the term easement no more than 30 years. I think that was a really good idea. I definitely want to make sure that we're protecting our private landowners, so.
17.
It starts on middle of 16, goes into 17 and 18.
Is there a second?
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Larson. Committee discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Storer?
On and against the amendment. Certainly, if it's up to, this is really about a private landowner making a decision about how his land is used. And I think if they determine for their own that you want to put a permanent easement for recreation and be paid for that kind of easement, I think it's really a decision for them to make. And I feel like it really ties the hands of private landowners actually by saying that this is only a term easement, which is really a lease. It means that the community can't really make the same kind of investment in that area if they don't know that they're going to have that that access for more than the term of the lease. So I think it just ties everybody's hands. Again, this is not about condemning private land, or anything like that. It's a willing seller, willing buyer, willing negotiating between the parties. And I think giving them the flexibility and the freedom to make that decision is probably the best way to go there. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Storer. Representative Byron.
Chairman Western, yeah, I also stand against this, for fear of, I think it's important to tell the committee here that, in the case that somebody were to apply for a grant, receive the grant, get a 30-year easement, and then that 30-year easement expire, we're going to run into issues where we have now publicly funded something across a piece of property that there's no longer access to. So I stand in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Byron. Any further discussion? Someone like to call? Question being called. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
No.
Let's just do a show of hands again. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed, please raise your hand. I believe that amendment fails.
Fails on a tie
Yeah,
vote.
fails on a tie
Yes,
vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Let's keep working on page 6. The amendments.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Storer.
sorry, if we could go back to page 5.
Sure.
I would move an amendment to strike the word necessary from page 5, line 17. I don't think it's necessary, actually, to, if that makes people feel more comfortable.
Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Representative Larson. Any discussion? Sensing the urge to vote, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
No.
That amendment is adopted. Yes, page 5, line 17 is just striking the word necessary. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Storer.
Point of clarification on line, I believe one of our testifiers noted consultation and said that there was the language as necessary in his copy, which the only place I could figure out where to put that was line 14, but it's not there in my copy. So I just wasn't sure we were looking at the same copy.
This is page 8, line 12.
Oh, I see, yes.
Okay.
Sorry. I put it at the end. Clarification noted, thank you.
Go ahead.
No,
Was that, were you making a motion to amend that?
no.
Okay. All right. Any amendments on page 8? Representative Winter. To strike as necessary on line 12? Second. Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Ooh,
Sorry.
Representative Storer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment, I think as necessary here just means that if we're building a shooting range, we're not consulting with, an entity that doesn't have anything to do with shooting ranges. We might actually consult with Game and Fish on something like that. I think it just means that there's a variety of projects here. If it doesn't impact what other entities are involved with, then it doesn't make sense.
Any other discussion, committee? Representative Burkhart.
Mr. Chairman, I would support the suggested amendment that they do have to consult. Actually, it's a little less prescriptive than one I had thought about, so I would just support that amendment.
Any other discussion? Representative Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's really important that we involve these governmental agencies that are directing the affairs out there on these Wyoming lands and the federal lands. It's important that they have a say and that at least it's been discussed with these agencies. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Sensing the urge to vote, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. That amendment is adopted. Barb, you got that one? Any more amendments on page 8? Page 9?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Let
Representative Larson.
Larson.
I'd like to move the amendment as presented for the wildlife amendment. So
Committee members, do we all have that in front of us? So a motion has been made. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Representative Byron. Discussion on the amendment? Sensing the urge to vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no. That amendment is adopted. All right, page 9. Page 10. Page 11. All right. Committee, any further discussion? Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
That was
let's
page
go back
4,
to
I believe.
page, yes, 4. Starts the end of line 14, goes into 15 and 16. Let's put that cap that no fund shall be expended from the income account until appropriated by the legislature. I would say after 250,000. I think 250,000 is a good amount. Can I get wording to the secretary?
So Representative
How would
Villalobos,
we
do you
word
want
that?
just a cap in general, total expenditures, or just one project? Or
I would say per project,
in excess of?
yes.
Okay. Barb, do you need any clarification? Representative, that's correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear her.
Exact wording.
Let's see here. Can I bring it over to you? Can I write it out? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? I guess the motion's been made. Is there a second? Made and seconded by Representative Larson. Any discussion?
Question?
Question be called. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. That amendment is adopted. Committee, is there any other discussion or amendments on the bill? Question be called. Barb, will you please call the roll?
Representative Angelos,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart,
Aye.
Representative Byron,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
aye.
Representative Singh,
No.
Representative Storer. Aye. Chairman Western,
Aye.
Representative Winter,
No.
and Chairman Newsom is excused, correct?
Chairman Newsom, I would sure hope so.
She is online, though.
She is.
Yeah. Okay, and will this bill be referred?
It most certainly will.
Thank you.
I think committee number 2 might have a word about that if it wasn't.
6 aye, 2 no.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Obviously, we gavel back in about 5 minutes. I don't think we're going to have time to hear the other bills we had up today. We will just punt them to Thursday. So thank you very much. We are adjourned. Let me make sure.